The bridge of the Korthik warship Dominator hummed with quiet activity. General Vextar stood before the massive viewing screen, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he watched the stars drift by. His scaled hide gleamed under the ship's blue lighting, and his yellow eyes reflected the cold satisfaction of a predator planning his next hunt. The humans had been expanding too quickly. Their small colonies were spreading across the outer rim like some kind of infection. The Korthik Empire had ruled this sector for over 300 years, and these soft pink creatures thought they could just move in and claim territory. It was time to teach them a lesson about respecting their betters. "General Vextar," came a voice from behind him. The general turned to see Commander Zilmuth approaching, his movements quick and eager. The younger Korthik's head crest was raised, high with excitement, which usually meant good news from the field operations. "Report, Commander," Vextar said, his voice a low rumble that made the metal floor vibrate slightly. "The raid on New Haven Colony was a complete success, sir," Zilmuth said, his razor-sharp teeth clicking together in what passed for a Korthik smile. "We caught them completely by surprise. No time to send distress signals or mount any kind of defense." Vextar nodded approvingly. New Haven had been chosen specifically because it was isolated and poorly defended. The humans had established it only 2 years ago, thinking they were safe out here in the empty space between star systems. They were wrong. Casualties? The general asked. "Minimal on our side, sir. 3 minor injuries when some of the humans tried to fight back with primitive weapons. Nothing serious." Zilmuth paused, his excitement growing. "But here's the interesting part, General. We managed to capture several dozen of them alive. This was unexpected." Vextar raised his head, his neck frills extending slightly. "Alive? For what purpose?" "Intelligence gathering, sir, and leverage." Zilmuth pulled out a small datapad and began reading. "We thought capturing some of them might give us useful information about human colony locations and defense plans. Plus, we can use them to negotiate if the humans decide to retaliate." Vextar considered this. It wasn't a bad strategy. The Korthik had used hostages before with other species. Most civilized races would negotiate to save their own people, even if it meant giving up strategic advantages. "What kind of humans did you capture?" "Well, that's the strange thing, sir," Zilmuth said, his voice taking on a puzzled tone. "They're all quite small, much smaller than the human soldiers we've encountered before. At first, we thought they might be a different subspecies, or maybe they were just weak from poor nutrition." "Smaller?" Vextar's interest was growing. "Perhaps. These were the human leaders or scientists. Smaller often meant more intelligent in many species." "Yes, sir. The largest one barely reaches up to my chest plate. Most of them are even smaller than that." Zilmuth scrolled through his datapad. "But here's what's really odd. They're incredibly loud and emotional, much more so than adult humans. They refuse to cooperate with our standard interrogation techniques. Instead of showing proper fear and submission, they just keep making noise." "What kind of noise?" "Crying, mostly. And they keep calling out for their parents and asking when they can go home. It's quite annoying, actually. The guards are having trouble keeping them quiet." Zilmuth looked up from his pad. "Some of them even tried to bite Sergeant Krex. When he got too close." General Vextar felt the first small stirring of unease in his chest, though he couldn't quite identify why. Something about this situation didn't feel right. "Show me the recordings of the capture." Zilmuth activated his datapad's projection system, and a 3-dimensional image appeared in the air between them. The scene showed Korthik soldiers moving through what looked like a human settlement. Buildings were burning in the background, and human adults were running in panic. But as Vextar watched, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The Korthik soldiers were indeed capturing small humans, but these weren't just small adults. They moved differently. They held hands with each other when they were scared. They reached up toward the larger humans who were trying to protect them. "Commander," Vexstar said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "How small did you say these humans were?" "The tallest one is maybe 4 feet high, sir. Most are closer to 3 feet. Some are even smaller." Zilmuth was still excited, not noticing the change in his general's demeanor. "We've got them all secured in Holding Bay 7. They're being quite troublesome, though. They won't eat our food, and they keep trying to comfort each other when the guards aren't looking." Vextar's 4 stomachs suddenly felt like they were full of ice water. He had studied human behavior patterns during his military training. He knew about their social structures, their family units, their breeding habits, and he was beginning to realize what his subordinate had done. "Commander," he said, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge, "these small humans you captured, were they alone when you found them?" "Oh no, sir. They were with adult humans who fought very hard to protect them. We had to stun or kill most of the adults to get to the small ones. The adults seemed almost insane in their efforts to shield these smaller humans with their own bodies." The ice water in Vextar's stomachs turned to liquid fire. "And you said they keep asking for their parents?" "Yes, sir. Over and over again. 'Where's my mommy?' And I want my daddy. It's really quite pathetic." Zilmuth finally seemed to notice that his general's mood had changed dramatically. "Sir, is something wrong?" Before Vextar could answer, the bridge's communication system chimed. Sub-Commander Rax, the ship's intelligence officer, appeared on the screen. His usually calm expression was replaced by something that looked very much like panic. "General Vextar," Rax said, his voice tight with stress, "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about the humans." "Put him through," Vextar ordered, though he was already dreading what he was about to hear. Rax's image flickered as the connection stabilized. "Sir, I've been monitoring human communication networks since the New Haven raid. The chatter has increased by over 2,000% in the last 6 hours. They're using words and phrases I've never seen before in their military communications." "What kind of words?" Vextar asked, though he was afraid he already knew. "Terms like our babies, and stolen children, and something they keep calling a code black emergency. Sir, I think we may have made a serious mistake." Commander Zilmuth looked back and forth between the general and the intelligence officer, confusion clear on his face. "I don't understand. What mistake?" "We captured enemy personnel for interrogation. This is standard military procedure." "General." Vextar closed his yellow eyes and felt his career, and possibly his life, crashing down around him. When he opened them again, both of his subordinates took an involuntary step backward at the expression they saw there. "Commander Zilmuth," the general said in a voice that could have frozen plasma, "please tell me exactly what you think you captured on New Haven." "Small humans, sir. Weak specimens suitable for interrogation and leverage." "You fool," Vextar whispered. "You absolute fool. You didn't capture weak adult humans." He turned to face the viewing screen, where the stars continued their eternal dance, unaware that one small mistake was about to change the balance of power in this entire sector of space. "You captured their offspring. You seized human children." The bridge fell completely silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines and the sound of Commander Zilmuth's sharp intake of breath as the full magnitude of his error finally hit him. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming through the Earth Defense Station. The hot liquid splashed across his uniform as he jumped to his feet, but he didn't notice. That particular alarm only went off for one thing: a distress signal from a human colony. Jake ran through the corridors toward the communication center, his boots echoing off the metal walls. Other officers were running too, all of them wearing the same expression of worry and determination. Colony attacks were rare, but when they happened, every second counted. The communication center was already buzzing with activity when Jake arrived. Technician Lisa Murphy looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, we've got a code red from New Haven Colony. The signal cut off 3 minutes ago." "Show me what we have," Jake ordered, moving to stand behind her chair. Lisa's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard, and the main screen filled with static-filled images. "This is all we got, sir." The transmission was breaking up badly. Jake watched the grainy footage and felt his blood turn cold. He could see Korthak soldiers moving through the colony streets. Buildings were on fire. Human civilians were running in panic. But what made Jake's hands clench into fists was what he saw the alien soldiers carrying. Small bundles. Small human shapes being dragged toward alien transport ships. "Dear God," Jake whispered, "are those ... "Children, sir," Lisa said, her voice barely audible. The Korthaks took the children. Jake stared at the screen for another moment, then spun around. "Get me Admiral Grant. Now, Priority 1 emergency channel." While Lisa worked to establish the connection, Jake called up the colony records for New Haven. 2,000 people lived there. 430 of them were under the age of 16. The colony had 3 schools, a playground, and a youth center. It was a family colony, the kind of place where people went to raise their kids in peace and safety. The screen flickered, and Admiral Lisa Grant appeared. She was sitting in her office at Earth Defense Command, but Jake could see she was already putting on her uniform jacket. She had heard the alarms, too. "Report, Morrison," she said without preamble. "Admiral, New Haven Colony has been attacked by Korthak forces. The colony is destroyed. Most of the adult population appears to be dead or missing." Jake paused, his throat tight. "Ma'am, they took the children. All of them." Admiral Grant went completely still. For a moment, Jake thought the transmission had frozen. Then the Admiral leaned forward, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward. "Confirm that, Commander. They took children?" "Yes, ma'am. We have visual confirmation. Korthak soldiers loading human children onto transport vessels." Admiral Grant closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her voice was deadly. "Calm. Morrison, I am declaring a code black emergency as of this moment. All Earth Defense Forces are to return to base immediately. Cancel all leave. Cancel all non-essential operations. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have is now focused on one mission." Jake had never heard of a code black emergency. "Ma'am, what are my orders?" "Find me those children, Commander. Find them and bring them home. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how many ships we have to sacrifice. Those children come home." The Admiral's voice grew harder with each word. "And Morrison? Send a message to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in known space. Tell them what happened at New Haven. Tell them the Korthaks have our children." The connection ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years. He had fought pirates and raiders and hostile aliens. But he had never seen Admiral Grant look like that before. It was the look of a mother bear whose cubs had been threatened. "Sir?" Lisa was looking at him with wide eyes. "What's a code block?" "Emergency?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "But I think we're about to find out." 3 hours later, Captain Ben Taylor was on the bridge of his ship, the destroyer Vengeance, when the message came through. He read it twice before the full meaning hit him, and then he had to sit down in his command chair. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We have received emergency orders from Earth Defense Command. The Korthak Empire has attacked New Haven Colony and captured human children. We are to return to Earth immediately for reassignment. The bridge went quiet. Then his weapons officer, Dan Cooper, looked up from his station. Captain, did you say they took children? Confirmed. Multiple children have been taken prisoner by hostile alien forces. Ben watched his crew's reaction and felt a chill run down his spine. These were professional soldiers, trained to remain calm under pressure. But as the news sank in, their faces changed. Dan Cooper's hands were already moving over his weapons console, running diagnostics on systems that had been checked just hours before. Navigator Amy Wells, who had 2 young daughters back on Earth, was plotting courses with an intensity that bordered on rage. Captain, Dan said, his voice carefully controlled. Request permission to begin weapons modification procedures. What kind of modifications, Dan? The kind that make things hurt more, sir. Ben looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. He saw parents and siblings and people who remembered being children themselves. He saw the same expression he had seen on Admiral Grant's face during the emergency briefing. Permission granted, he said, but keep it within regulations. Dan Cooper smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Of course, sir, perfectly within regulations. On Earth, the news spread through human space like wildfire. President John Harris was in a cabinet meeting when his chief of staff burst through. The door without knocking. Double quotes, Mr. President. We have a situation. The Orcs have attacked New Haven Colony. Casualties? The president asked, already reaching for his secure communication device. Unknown at this time, sir. But Mr. President, the chief of staff hesitated. They took hostages, children. President Harris stopped moving. He was a father of 3 himself. His youngest daughter was only 8 years old. How many children? We think over 400, sir. The president closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his staff saw the same transformation that was happening all across human space. A politician disappeared, replaced by something much more primitive and dangerous. Cancel. My schedule, he said quietly. Call an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Contact every human world leader, every colonial governor, every ship captain in the fleet. His voice grew harder. And get me a direct line to Admiral Grant. We're going to war. Back on the Vengeance, engineer Katie Wells was working on the ship's engines when the full impact hit her. Her hands started shaking as she thought about her own daughters, safe at home but the same age as the children who had been taken. Katie? Her assistant, Mark Johnson, was looking at her with concern. You okay? Those children, she whispered. They must be so scared. Mark nodded grimly. He had a son of his own. What do you need me to do? Katie wiped her eyes and turned. Back to her engines. Help me make this ship faster. A lot faster. Those kids are waiting for us to come get them. All across human space, the same scene was playing out. Parents were volunteering for dangerous missions. Civilian ships were being converted to military use. Weapons that had been stored for decades were being pulled out of storage and prepared for war. The Orcs had made many mistakes in their long history as a galactic power. They had underestimated enemies before. They had chosen the wrong battles and trusted the wrong allies, but they had never made a mistake like this one. They had never taken the children of a species that would burn down the galaxy to get them back in the depths of space. Human ships were already changing course, converging on New Haven like antibodies rushing to fight an infection. And on every ship, human beings were discovering just how far they were willing to go to protect their young. General Vexstar stood in his war room, staring at the tactical display with growing disbelief. Red dots representing human ships were appearing on the screen faster than his computers could track them. What had started as a few scattered vessels 6 hours ago had become a flood of contacts moving toward New Haven from every direction. "This cannot be accurate," he said to his tactical advisor, Prime Strategist Culver. "Run the scan again." Culver's tentacles moved nervously over his. "Control panel. Sir, I have run the scan 17 times. The readings are correct. We are detecting over 3,000 human vessels converging on this location." 3,000? Vexstar felt his throat sacs contract with stress. "That's impossible. Intelligence. Our EPORTS indicate the humans have maybe 800 ships in their entire fleet. Sir, many of these vessels are not military. We're seeing cargo ships, passenger liners, mining vessels, even small personal craft. They appear to have armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find." Culver paused, his voice becoming smaller. "Sir, they're also detecting civilian evacuation ships being converted to troop transports." Vexstar's forearms trembled slightly. In all his years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. Entire species had surrendered to the Korthic Empire rather than face their military might. But the humans were doing the opposite. They were abandoning their defenses, leaving their colonies vulnerable, stripping their trade routes of protection, all to mass their forces at one location. "What about their other territories?" he asked. "Surely they're not leaving everything undefended?" Culver checked his displays again. "Sir, it appears they are doing exactly that. Our monitoring stations report that human ships are abandoning strategic positions throughout their space. Some colonies have been left with no protection at all." This made no tactical sense. Vexstar had studied military strategy for over 2 centuries. No rational commander would sacrifice the security of an entire civilization to rescue a few dozen prisoners. It was illogical. It was insane. "Sir," came another voice from across the war room. Communications Officer Zexenol was holding up a datapad with obvious distress. "I'm intercepting human communications, and I think you need to hear this." "Play it," Vexstar ordered. The speakers crackled to life with human voices speaking in their strange, emotional language. The translation. Software worked quickly to convert the words. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the merchant vessel, Hope's Dream. I have 40 armed volunteers aboard and enough supplies for a 2-week siege. We're 12 hours out from the rally point. Copy that, Hope's Dream. This is Admiral Grant aboard. The Retribution. You are cleared to join the fleet. Welcome to the fight. Admiral, this is Captain Brooks on the mining ship Iron Will. My crew and I have rigged our cargo bay with improvised weapons. We know we're not soldiers, but those are our kids out there. Understood, Iron Will? Every ship counts. Every parent counts." The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Vexstar felt something cold crawling up his spine. These weren't military communications. These were civilians volunteering for what would certainly be a suicide mission. "Sir?" Culver's voice was barely a whisper. "Should we perhaps consider negotiating? If we return the prisoners..." "The Korthic Empire does not negotiate with inferior species," Vexstar snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, he was beginning to wonder if the humans were really as inferior as he had believed. In the holding bay 7 levels below, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was trying to keep the captured children calm. She had been taken prisoner 3 days ago when the Korthics raided the research station where she worked. Now she found herself in the impossible position of caring for 43 terrified human children in an alien prison. "Miss Elena," said a small voice beside her. She looked down to see Amy Chun, a 10-year-old girl with dirt on her face and determination in her eyes. "Is it true what the guards are saying? Are our parents coming to get us?" Elena knelt down to Amy's level. The child had become the unofficial leader of the group, helping to keep the younger ones calm and organized. "I don't know for sure, sweetie, But I know your parents love you very much, and they're probably trying very hard to find you." "The big lizard soldiers seem scared," said Tim Chun, Amy's 8-year-old brother. "They keep looking at their computers and talking in worried voices." Elena had noticed this too. The Korthic guards who had been confident and cruel just yesterday now seemed nervous and jumpy. They spoke in hushed tones and kept checking their weapons. "Amy," Elena said quietly, "remember what we talked about yesterday? About being brave and smart?" Amy nodded. "You said we should pay attention to everything and remember it all for when we get rescued." "That's right. And I also said we should help each other and look for opportunities." Elena glanced around to make sure the guards weren't listening. "I think those opportunities might be coming soon." Amy's eyes grew wide with understanding. "Should we get ready?" "Yes," Elena whispered. "Tell the others quietly. When the time comes, we need to be ready to help ourselves." Back in the war room, General Vexstar was receiving reports that made less sense with each passing hour. His intelligence network was reporting massive movements throughout human space. Civilian populations were being evacuated from frontier worlds. Industrial planets had switched to wartime production. Even more disturbing, human colonies were organizing their own militia forces and sending them toward the battle zone. "Sir?" Sub-Commander Rax appeared on the communication screen, his face grim. "I have been monitoring human news broadcasts, and I believe you need to see this." The main screen flickered and showed a human news reporter standing in front of what appeared to be a massive spaceport. Behind her, ships of every size and description were taking off in a continuous stream. "This is Linda Park reporting from New Tokyo Spaceport, where we're witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Volunteer fleets are launching from every major world in human space, all with the same destination and the same mission: to rescue the children taken from New Haven Colony." The image switched to show an interview with a human male wearing work clothes and carrying what looked like a modified mining tool. "My name is Bill Henderson. I work construction, and I've never been in a fight in my life, but I've got a daughter the same age as those kids who were taken. If there's even a chance I can help bring them home, then I'm going." The human's face was set with grim determination. "We all are." The broadcast continued with similar interviews. A schoolteacher who had never left her home planet. A farmer who had converted his crop transport into an armed vessel. A retired grandmother who claimed she could still operate a gun turret. All of them heading toward New Haven with the same purpose. "General." Vexstar turned off the screen and looked around his war room. His officers were staring at the tactical displays with expressions of growing panic. The human fleet was now estimated at over 5,000 ships and growing. "Sir," Culver said hesitantly, "perhaps we should consider our options. This is clearly not a normal military response." "What do you mean?" Vexstar asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "Sir, the humans are not approaching this as a tactical problem. They're not trying to minimize casualties or preserve resources. They appear to be treating this as—" Culver paused, searching for the right words. "As a rescue mission for their offspring. They don't seem to care about the cost." Vexstar looked at the tactical display again. The red dots representing human ships continued to multiply. Some were military vessels, but many more were civilian craft that had no business in a war zone. Yet they kept coming, driven by something the Korthic military machine had never encountered before. Pure, focused, parental rage. For the first time in his long military career, General Vexstar began to wonder if he was about to face something that could not be defeated by superior firepower or tactical brilliance. He was about to face an entire species that had decided their children were worth any sacrifice, and he was beginning to realize that might be a battle the Korthic Empire could not win. The human fleet arrived like a storm, made of metal and fire. Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of her flagship, the battleship Retribution, and watched as thousands of human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel around New Haven. The sight filled her with both pride and terrible purpose. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, Commander Rick Barnes, "all ships are reporting ready for combat. We have confirmed positions on the Korthik fleet. They're holding position near the fourth moon." Grant nodded, her eyes never leaving. The main screen. The enemy fleet looked impressive with their sleek alien designs and advanced weapons. Under normal circumstances, she might have been worried about the odds. But these were not normal circumstances. "Open a channel to the Korthik." "Flagship," she ordered. The screen flickered, and General Vextar appeared. The alien looked tired and stressed, his yellow eyes darting nervously. Good, Grant thought. He should be afraid. "General Vextar," she said, her voice calm and deadly quiet. "I am Admiral Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Force. You have something. That belongs to us." "Admiral Grant," Vextar replied, trying to sound confident but failing. "I assume you are referring to the prisoners we took during our lawful military operation against your illegal colony." Grant's expression didn't change, but everyone on her bridge could feel the temperature drop. "Those aren't prisoners, General. Those are children. Human children. And you're going to return them to us. Now." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Vextar said. "These prisoners are valuable assets in our negotiations with your government. We are prepared to discuss terms for their release, but first your fleet must withdraw from this system." Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Vextar had ever seen on any creature's face. "General, let me explain something to you," she said. "You see that fleet behind me? 5,000 ships. Some of them are military vessels with trained soldiers and advanced weapons. But most of them are civilian ships crewed by parents, teachers, farmers, and grandparents who have never fired a shot in anger." She leaned forward. "Do you know what makes them dangerous, General? They don't care if they live or die. They only care about getting those children back. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to return every single child, unharmed, or we're going to destroy every ship in your fleet and take them back ourselves." Vextar tried to maintain his composure. "Admiral, you are outnumbered and outgunned. My fleet has superior technology and trained warriors. Your civilian vessels won't last 5 minutes in actual combat." "You're probably right," Grant agreed. "A lot of good people are going to die today. But General, even if you destroy 90% of my fleet, the remaining ships will still outnumber yours. And they'll keep coming until every child is safe, or every human is dead." The communication ended, leaving Vextar staring at a blank screen. He turned to his officers, who were all looking at him with expressions of barely controlled panic. "Sir," Culver said quietly, "what are your orders?" Before Vextar could answer, his weapons officer called out urgently, "General, the humans are moving." Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the assault ship Fury, and she was about to do something that would have been considered insane under any other circumstances. Her ship was designed to carry boarding parties onto enemy vessels, but she had never attempted to board a ship while under fire from an entire enemy fleet. "All boarding teams prepare for combat insertion," she announced over the ship's communication system. "Remember, our job is to get to the children and get them out. Everything else is secondary." Her Marines were different from the usual professional soldiers she commanded. Mixed in with her regular troops were volunteers from across human space. There was Tom Wilson, a schoolteacher who had never held a weapon before 3 days ago. Linda Foster, a nurse who had left her hospital to help rescue children. And dozens of others who had one thing in common. They were all parents. "Captain." Her pilot called out, "The Korthiks are opening fire." Sarah watched as alien energy beams lanced through space toward the human fleet. Some ships were hit and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. But for every ship that was destroyed, 10 more kept coming. "Take us in," she ordered. "Target the Korthik flagship." The Fury accelerated toward the alien command ship, dodging weapons fire and debris from destroyed vessels. Sarah could see other human ships doing the same thing, throwing themselves at the enemy with reckless courage. Down in the Korthik holding bay, Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt the ship shake as the battle began. The alien guards were clearly panicked, speaking rapidly in their own language and pointing their weapons at shadows. "Amy," Elena whispered to the little girl beside her, "I think this is our chance." Amy Chun nodded and began quietly moving among the other children, passing along the message they had prepared. For the past day, they had been carefully watching their guards and memorizing the layout of the ship. Now it was time to put their plan into action. The youngest children would stay together in the center of the group for protection. The older ones would help create diversions and watch for opportunities. And Amy, despite being only 10 years old, would lead them toward what they hoped was the ship's communication center. When the ship shook again from weapons fire, the guards turned to look toward the door. That was when Amy moved. She slipped between two alien soldiers and pressed the button she had seen them use to open the cell door. The barrier disappeared, and suddenly 43 human children were free in the corridor. The Korthik guards spun around in surprise, but they were too slow. The children scattered in all directions, following the plan they had rehearsed. Some ran toward what they hoped were escape pods. Others headed for areas of the ship they thought might be important to damage. Amy and Tim Chun, along with Elena Rodriguez and 6 other children, ran toward the ship's bridge level. They didn't have weapons or military training, but they had something else, a desperate courage that comes from being far from home and scared for their lives. Back on the Fury, Captain Sarah Mitchell was preparing for the most difficult part of her mission. Her ship had successfully attached itself to the Korthik flagship, and her boarding teams were ready to cut through the alien hull. "Remember," she told her Marines and volunteers, "the children are our priority. Anything that threatens them is a target. Anything that helps us get to them is an objective. Questions?" Tom Wilson, the schoolteacher, raised his hand. "Captain, what if we encounter armed resistance?" Sarah looked at him for a moment. 3 days ago, he had been teaching math to 8-year-olds. Now he was about to fight alien soldiers to rescue children he had never met. "Tom," she said gently, "those are our kids in there. Human kids who are scared and want to go home. What do you think we should do about anyone who tries to stop us? From getting them back?" Tom nodded, his face setting into hard lines. "I understand, Captain." Sarah smiled grimly. "Good. Let's go get our children." The boarding teams moved through the hole they had cut in the alien ship's hull. They moved with purpose and determination, following corridor maps that intelligence had provided. But they soon realized they weren't the only ones moving toward the bridge. In the corridors ahead of them, they could hear the sound of running footsteps and alien voices shouting in panic. And mixed in with the chaos, they could hear something that made every human heart leap with hope. Children's voices, speaking English and getting closer. Amy Chun and her group had found the ship's main communication system, and the 10-year-old girl was about to do something that would change the course of the battle. Amy Chun pressed her small hands against the alien communication console and spoke into what she hoped was a microphone. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Amy Chun from New Haven Colony. We're on the big alien ship, and we need help." The response came immediately through speakers all around the ship. "Amy, this is Admiral Grant with the human fleet. Are you hurt?" Are the other children safe? Amy felt tears of relief running down her face. We're okay. We got out of our prison, and we're trying to help. There are 43 of us. The alien soldiers are really scared and running around everywhere. Good girl, Amy. You're very brave. Can you tell me where you are on the ship? Amy looked around at the alien symbols and strange equipment. I think we're near the control room. There are lots of screens, and the aliens keep shouting at each other. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Grant felt a fierce pride in the 10-year-old girl's courage. Amy, I need you to do something very important. Can you see any big red buttons or anything that looks like an alarm? Yes. There's a big red switch with alien writing on it. Perfect. When I count to 3, I want you to pull that switch. It will help our soldiers find you. 1 ... do. 3. Amy pulled the red switch, and immediately every alarm on the Korthik ship began screaming. Emergency lights flashed throughout the corridors, and the ship's defensive systems began shutting down. General Vextar arrived on his bridge, just in time to see his worst nightmare coming true. Not only were human boarding parties cutting through his ship, but his prisoners had escaped and were actively sabotaging his vessel. How is this possible? He shouted at his bridge crew. They are just children. Sir, Commander Zilmuth reported, his voice shaking. The small humans have accessed 17 different ship systems. They have disabled our weapons, shut down life support to sections 7 through 12, and somehow locked out our navigation controls. They are children. Vextar repeated, how do children know how to operate military equipment? Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had made it to the bridge with Amy's group, stepped forward. Because human children are taught to think and solve problems. You treated them like animals, but they've been watching and learning everything about your ship. Vextar stared at the human scientist. This is impossible. My species has conquered dozens of worlds. We have never faced resistance from captured offspring. That's because you've never captured human offspring before, Elena said calmly. Human children don't just wait to be rescued. They fight back. The ship shook again as more human boarding parties blasted through the hull. Over the communication system, they could hear human voices getting closer. This is Captain Mitchell of the boarding team Alpha. We're 3 levels below the bridge and moving up. Captain Mitchell. Amy called into the communication system. This is Amy. We're on the bridge. The big alien general is here. We're coming, Amy. Stay safe. General Vextar looked around his bridge at his panicking crew, at the human children who had taken over his ship's systems, and at the advancing human soldiers who were fighting with impossible courage. For the first time in his military career, he was faced with an enemy he could not defeat. Sir, Culver said quietly, perhaps it is time to consider surrender. The Korthik Empire does not surrender, Vextar said automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. Sir? Dr. Rodriguez interrupted. Look at your tactical display. Vextar turned to see the battle situation. His fleet was being destroyed. Human ships that should have been no match for Korthik technology were ramming his vessels or fighting until they exploded. His military advantage meant nothing against an enemy that cared more about the mission than their own lives. Doors exploded inward, and human soldiers poured through. Captain Sarah Mitchell led the charge, her weapon trained on General Vextar. Behind her came Marines and volunteers, including Tom Wilson, the schoolteacher, and Linda Foster, the nurse. Children, get behind us, Captain Mitchell ordered, but Amy. Chun stepped forward instead. Captain Mitchell, this is General Vextar. He's the one who ordered our capture. Amy looked up at the towering alien with no fear in her eyes. He thought we were just scared little animals. Sarah Mitchell looked at the 10-year-old girl who had helped disable an alien warship and felt a surge of pride in her species. Amy, you and the other children have done amazing work. But now it's time for the adults to finish this. She turned to General Vexstar. General, your fleet is destroyed. Your ship is disabled. Surrender now, and we might let you live long enough to deliver a message to your empire. Vexstar looked at the human soldiers surrounding him. They should have been easy to defeat. Humans were smaller and weaker than Korthiks. Their technology was inferior. Their numbers should not have mattered, but they had won anyway, because they had something his species had never understood. They had fought not for conquest or glory or tactical advantage. They had fought for their children. I surrender, he said quietly. Admiral Grant arrived on the bridge 20 minutes later to find all the children safe and General Vexstar under guard. The battle was over. The human fleet had lost over 800 ships and thousands of lives. But every single child was accounted for. Amy, Admiral Grant said, kneeling down to the girl's level, you did something incredibly brave today. You helped save yourself and all your friends. Amy looked serious. Admiral Grant, are our parents okay? Are they coming to get us? Yes, sweetie. They're already on their way, Grant smiled. In fact, I think some of them might have been flying those ships that came to rescue you. As the children were reunited with rescue teams and medical personnel, Admiral Grant turned to General Vexstar. The alien was sitting under guard, staring at the deck with defeat in his yellow eyes. General, she said, you're going to return to Korthik space. You're going to tell your leaders exactly what happened here today. And what message would you have me deliver? Vexstar asked bitterly. Tell them that human children are off limits, forever. Tell them that any species that harms human offspring will face the united wrath of humanity, regardless of the cost. Grant's voice grew hard. Tell them that we are dangerous when threatened, deadly when cornered, but absolutely unstoppable when our children are at risk. Vexstar nodded slowly. And if my leaders do not believe this message? Admiral Grant gestured toward the tactical display, which showed the wreckage of the Korthik fleet floating in space around them. Show them the battle recordings. Show them what 5,000 human parents can do when their children are threatened. Show them that we destroyed your entire fleet and rescued every single child. 3 days later, General Vexstar stood before the Korthik Imperial Council on the homeworld. His report became the most important intelligence briefing in the Empire's history. Honorable Council members, he began, I must inform you that humanity is not the weak species we believe them to be. They possess a strength that we do not understand and cannot defeat. Explain, demanded the Emperor. They will sacrifice everything for their offspring, not just their military forces, but their entire civilization if necessary. They do not calculate odds or consider tactical advantages when their young are threatened. They simply come for them. The council chamber was quiet as Vexstar continued. I recommend that we declare human children to be absolutely forbidden targets. Any contact with human offspring should be avoided at all costs. And if we choose not to follow this recommendation, asked one council member, Vexstar looked around the chamber at the most powerful leaders of his civilization. Then we will face extinction, honored ones, because humanity will never stop, never surrender, and never forgive any species that harms their children. Back on Earth, Amy Chun was playing in her backyard again. Her parents watched her from the window, and overhead, human patrol ships maintained constant watch. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity that never, ever threaten their children.